Professional serving community. Talkradio.nyc.
Back. We are back. I say we're back as if, like as if we went to a commercial break, but we didn't. We've been gone for a week, but we're back again. We're back in the attic. It's your boy, Tommy D. The show is Philanthropy and Focus. Tommy D is the nonprofit sector connector. I know that because I made it up, and that's me. I'm Tommy D. I go up 2 flights of stairs to meet with you every single Friday morning here in my attic, just below the roof of the house. I actually just was realizing, if you're not watching us and you're only listening, here's what my shirt says. What good have I done today? What good have I done today? This is a shirt my friend Christine Fitzpatrick from League of Yes. LeagueofYes.com is their website. It's an all-inclusive baseball league. They have 2 different fields out here on Long Island. So what good have I done today? Isn't that a great question to ask yourselves, as you enter into the world? It's the morning right now. You're engaging with people. I've already, which is my challenging part of the day, got 4 kids to school already, and that is super challenging. I think that's a bit of the good I've done so far today. But what did analyze that? Laurie, Carey, good morning. Welcome to the show. I'm going to introduce you and everything like that. But how are you? Good morning.
Good morning. How you doing, Tom?
I'm good. I'm doing good. I'm glad to be here. This is one of my favorite hours in the week. I get to have this opportunity to help nonprofit leaders tell their story and amplify their message. And when you call yourself the nonprofit sector connector, what cooler organization can you bring on than an organization called We Connect the Dots? So that's like pretty cool. That's like really on brand. I love that. So we're going to hear from Laurie, hear about what her organization is all about, her background, her story, her journey. Because I always say, there's some catalyst, there's some things that happen to put us on a path. May not have felt like it in the moment or in the years or the decades that we go through these things. But when you look back, you go, kind of made sense. That made sense, how that went in that direction. So, Laurie, the show is pretty cool. It's all about you today. It's all about your organization. It's all about the impact that you're making on these young people. We're going to talk hackathon. We're going to talk about We Connect the Dots. We're going to talk a little Nebula Academy. So really, without further ado, I always like to start the show out with this opportunity where you tell us about your journey. Tell us about your story. Certainly, I could read your bio and go to LinkedIn and do all that, but when I'm telling the Tommy D story, I want to tell the Tommy D story. You know what I'm saying? When Laurie tells the story, I want to hear Laurie tell that story. And, I'm going to interrupt you throughout because I'm going to go, really? No kidding. Tell me more, because that's how it is. That's what it's all about. Because I'm super curious to learn about you and your journey and the impact you're making. So why don't you start us off? Tell some stories.
Sure. So, my story is a little unique from most people, especially for women. I started, when I was in high school, I grew up in a very small rural town, and most people in my graduating class, women at least, got married. They either worked for the state of Albany, because I lived up in that area. So you either worked for the state or you got married and had kids. So, I had a challenging childhood. I'll say everybody's got their scars.
Yeah.
My dad died when I was very young, so my mom raised 4 kids, by herself. Mostly a lot of support from family and her that she had. She grew up in a family of 6 kids, so for her it was very much my uncles kind of stepped in as dads and helped us. But I didn't really know what I wanted to do when I went to go to college. My siblings, my brothers were going to college. My brother was an aeronautical engineer, and I was the youngest of the 4. So I had no idea what I wanted to do. I worked in a nursing home throughout high school. My mom was just, my mom worked 3 jobs, raising us. So I worked in a nursing home when I was in high school from like age 16 to, 19. And, when I was, early on in my career, I decided to, go with a friend to apply for a job at a manufacturing. This is when manufacturing was in the US, right? This is in the 80s. And telling my age. And so I went for this job interview and I got the job, and it was working on assembly line, building printed circuit boards.
Wow.
And so I loved it. I was just exposed to a whole world that I had no idea existed, right? And this was early in the technology industry, and that kind of launched my career path because I just got so absorbed in it. I mastered, and I was really good memorization skills. So I could, they give me a kit, a schematic, and I would just look at that schematic and build the kit, and then build it again and again. And honestly, the women on the assembly line weren't real happy with me because it was mostly older women on the assembly line, because women had, dexterity, more, their hands were better to do these kind of fine circuit board work, right? And so I mastered everything on the manufacturing floor, and I did everything from, quality control with soldering, wave soldering, you name it, I did it. And that exposure got me exposed to computers, and that kind of moved my career on. From there, I basically started working in early on when PCs weren't even a thing in business. Mostly you had Apple PCs or Apple computers that were in the businesses, and IBM PCs were just coming out. I got to an opportunity to do a job where I was building PCs and low-level formatting hard drives and doing some really intense work that's not typically you see women doing. And I just loved it. I loved it. And I really started looking at, how do you connect with other people like you, and how do you have a network of people? Because it was early in this industry. There was not a lot of things going on out there. So to talk to somebody else about what I was doing, there wasn't a lot of people to talk to. There was a company called Novell. Some people listening might know that company. They had a users group, and the operating system was like the operating system that was out there in the networking industry. And I was, early on in that. So got my certification in Novell. I was a certified instructor in Novell. And I started a users group, and then became a board member for NUI, which is the Network Users International. And so that kind of launched my career in that concept of creating networks. I created an organization called CDNUG up in Albany. That was a users group for people like me that were working in the industry, and they wanted to talk to others and bring in guest speakers and things like that. And again, this was really early in the industry, and certifications were a big deal then, right? So, I found that more certifications I got, the more my salary increased, the more my skill sets increased. So I went to Boston University and did my certification there, got to be a certified instructor, went through a whole rigorous program to do that, and be recorded and evaluated to do that, which was exciting. And so it led me to, I found that if I taught people the skills that I was learning, it helped me reinforce my knowledge. I loved teaching. I loved helping others to learn. I loved helping connecting people. And so, as my career evolved, and I ended up working for Microsoft, I ended up starting my own business first in a consulting format. I did consulting all over the world. I was CNE of the year for those listening who might know Novell and know what that is. It was a pretty big deal for me at that point. I was like, hey, cool, I can retire now. I got that like big bucket list thing done. Um,
Yeah.
so it was a really, exciting path that I took. And then I had two more kids. I have four kids myself.
As well.
You know,
Yeah.
two
Yeah.
from my first marriage, two from my second marriage. And my youngest was 4 months old. And I was really feeling like, hey, you've raised three kids, and now this fourth one, you're never home. You're always traveling and doing this stuff. Maybe you need to step back a little bit. So I did. And in the process, Microsoft offered me a position to work from home. And my son was 4 months old. And I was like, I could do that. And
Yeah.
so I ended up, it was a 2-year plan. I was going to stay there for a couple of years and then go back and do my own thing, because I was very much an entrepreneur. It's kind of
Yeah.
in my DNA. My whole family is, my grandparents own their own business. It's kind of like in my genes. and so I ended up working for Microsoft for 10 years. And then while I worked for Microsoft, I was kind of feeling like I've got to move on. I got to do something, get back and do my own thing. And so I went to a program at Harvard, and really brought this concept or idea of we connect the dots to that, to that program. And the program was it was basically an MBA program, but a certification program for people that are in their careers 15 to 20 years, looking to kind of, take that next step or that next level in their career. And so it was really an amazing opportunity for me. I literally was on campus at Harvard, staying in dorms. I had 123 classmates. I was working at Microsoft while doing this. Everybody else that was there was kind of like the companies were paying for it, and they were coming, and they didn't have to work while they were there. I made an agreement with my manager, like, I want to do this. Can I do this? And he says, as long as you keep up with your your work while you're there, like,
What
great,
was,
no problem.
what was he really doing for you? He goes, yeah, you can do whatever you want. Just don't, you can keep working, and I don't really care. Figure out whatever you can do on the side, right? Like
Yeah.
it's almost like he wasn't really helping you out so much. Like
Yeah,
You know what
but
I mean?
they supported me. They
Yeah,
definitely supported me to do it, so it was great, and they supported the organization too. When I initially started it, Microsoft was very much involved in making sure that the organization was successful. As an employee, I could earn $25 an hour as volunteering, and that would go towards any organization I wanted it to. So
yeah.
any volunteer hours that I was doing, I actually got money back to the organization. So it
And
was
that
really
came
great.
from Microsoft. That was like
Yeah, yeah.
Microsoft
They
does it.
do. They basically employees at Microsoft and Apple does this. Other companies do this. If you volunteer your time, you can. There's a certain dollar. I don't know what it is. It was $25 an hour when I was doing it. It might be different now. And then they take those funds and they donate it to your organization through their giving plan. And
Okay.
so it was really a great opportunity for me to do the work I wanted to on weekends and nights while I was working at Microsoft and grow the organization successfully. And it really came out of this concept. This is the interesting part of the story where the diversity comes in, is that, when I was doing this idea, I was going about creating a program for girls. This was when Girls Who Code wasn't really a thing yet. This was all new, and we were seeing, that we needed to get more girls. I knew that from the time I was involved in this industry, that we needed to get more women into into these programs, and you need to do it at a young age so they have this exposure. Because I didn't, if I had had that exposure when I was younger, only knows where I would have gone, right? And so I think, so I said, how do I do that? So I brought this concept of this pitch, because part of the Harvard program was you had to have a project you were working on. And this was my project. It wasn't a personal project. It wasn't, a lot of people came with business projects for their companies, right? This was about my personal passion about how do I get more women into tech, right? Into the, and see and have exposure into STEM or STEAM career program, opportunities. And when I brought this concept to, there was 16 women out of 123 classmates in my program. So this woman from Canada said to me, what do you people in the US, you put everybody in buckets. What are you teaching women if you're going to have a program just for women? How are you teaching them to engage and work with men? And
Uh,
I really took that to heart and said, you know what, you're right. How do I create a program that's not just for women, but helps women and men understand the value of that diversity and that thought process and that in a product design and everything, right? How do you bring that bridge together so that we learn as a society in the US especially, how do you make sure that we're, bringing in those different diverse mindsets and thinking, and we get women and men to work better together. So there's not this perception that you have to be a male or female in these types of roles, right?
yeah.
And so that's where the we connect the dots kind of came in, is the concept of, bringing, industry, education, local government, and everybody together, parents, and students, to really understand how do we kind of create this bridge between technology, industry, and education, and bring these informative programs and awareness to these career paths so that students know. Because really is, if you're a young kid and your parents aren't in tech, you're going to know what you know, right?
Right.
And if you're never exposed to something else, you'll never know it. And I'm a great example of that. My mom was in real estate. My
Right.
parents were both real estate agents. So my mom had no clue about technology, right? So there was no exposure for me. I got it in there. I fell into it accidentally, right?
Yeah,
Through
what
this
if you didn't?
through this.
What you ever think, like, sorry to interrupt you there, but what do you like? What if you didn't? Like, what if you didn't stop working at the nursing home and go get this gig on the assembly line? Like, a lot of kids, like, if you go back to that era, and I mean, this era too, people take stuff apart. I remember my brother was like notorious about taking toys apart. I know he would take like a 9-volt battery, right, and like hold it to the motor, and this little motor, and the motor, he didn't do anything. He would like just like try to like scratch the table with it or whatever. Just like the little motors it would have, like
Oh
whatever
yeah, yeah.
whatever turns a wheel in a car or this. And so like now he didn't go further into that field. He's in business, but he didn't. But that was something he tinkered. Like people tinkered. Like if you think about like uh um Jobs and Wozniak and all that stuff when they were doing and there was all these like guys who are gals too, I'm sure, but probably not as many as you're talking about, right? But like that would tinker and they say, I'm gonna make my own computer. I'm telling you this, Laurie, honestly, sometimes I'm afraid to like do something wrong in Microsoft Outlook and people go to me like, what does it matter? Like you're not gonna break freaking Outlook, Tommy D. Like it's not like that big a deal. But like I'm Gen X, and like I guess at times I felt like I don't understand the stuff. Now I don't care as much anymore. I just try to break things, like I guess that's more my
Well,
philosophy.
it brings up a really good point, is that in our school systems, and it's
Yeah,
changing,
it is
right?
changing. Mhm.
But we're taught that failure is a bad thing, right? So,
Yeah.
got to
Yeah.
pass, got to
Yeah.
pass, right? And
Yeah.
then we got to the point where we're teaching to exams and not really teaching, right? And so
Right.
I really felt like part of my mission was not only to introduce kids to technology, but change how we teach and that approach to teaching that. And so looking at the neuroscience research and really understanding cognitive neuroscience to understand how do we really, transform education in a way, because many students, and honestly, if you look at teaching styles from a teacher perspective, if a teacher teaches more hands-on and more visual learning, then every student in the classroom will learn, right? But if the teacher's very analytical and needs to look at numbers and things like that, you'll only get 50% of the students in
Got
the
it.
class being successful, right? Because that's just, so teachers have a tendency to teach to their way, how they
Their
learn.
style. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Learning
And
style.
because that's what they know. It's no different than the students knowing only what they know, right? So what we try to do is demonstrate to teachers, how do you really create fun, engaging learning experiences that transform education in a way where everybody gets a positive impact, right? Not just those students who excel.
Yeah.
Because, and what we see in our programs, and this is the best part, like the hackathon is, our hackathon program was one of the first programs that we started, and that came out of our students, our community ambassador students, who were really part of shaping and running the organization. These young entrepreneurs that said, "Hey, we want to learn to code." I'm like, "Okay, great. So how do let's create a program." Originally called it a hackathon first year, and parents were like, "You're teaching our kids to hack? What
Yeah.
is that?"
Right.
And so nobody, parents weren't letting their kids sign up. And this
Oh.
was, this was 10 years ago. So we said, okay, we'll call it a codeathon, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so we called it the codeathon.
But did
And
you
we
have
just
parentheses? Was it parentheses hackathon?
no, it wasn't. But we had to really, it was really about pitching it and selling it to the parents, right?
Or
Because they were signing their kids up, because these are
yeah.
13 to 18-year-olds, right? And so really looking at how do you, get parents to understand the importance and the value of this, right?
Yeah.
And so, this program evolved, and what we saw in the program, which was so exciting and so, I guess rewarding for me, is that you'd see these students working together in teams. Some students who had, these really capabilities of doing coding, they know how to code, or they had exposure to code, and then students who didn't. And that bridge of those skill sets coming and seeing, oh wow, your creativity and your thought process is so different than mine. And then that value and that bonding that
At a
took
young
place with
age.
those students.
Right?
Yeah,
Like
at a
at a
young age.
young
Oh
age.
yeah.
We got to take a quick break. We're going to come back because I want to get into teaching styles and all this stuff. I think we're going to have to do 3 episodes of a show with you. I just realized. I realized it as you were talking there. So just those learning styles, and at such a young age, like I think of my children, 15, 13, 12, just had a birthday, and 9. So 15, I'm doing new numbers because 2 of them
And
just
they're all different,
right.
right?
Oh my God.
Because I know my poor
But
kids.
exactly. Yeah, forget about it. That's a whole. We'll talk about that. So let's take a quick break. Let's come back. I want to talk about how you transform that. I want to talk about certifications. I have a question about certifications, micro certifications. I want to talk about because that's a thing, and college and not college and technical stuff,
Yeah. No, these are great
and
topics.
all that stuff. All right, this is Philanthropy Focus. I have a lot of ideas. She has a lot of ideas. I don't know what's going to happen. We'll be right back.
Are you a conscious co-creator? Are you on a quest to raise your vibration and your consciousness? I'm Sam Leibowitz, your conscious consultant, and on my show, The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, we will touch upon all these topics and more. Listen live at our new time on Thursdays at 12 noon Eastern Time. That's The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, Thursdays 12 noon on talkradio.nyc.
Are you a high-achieving, growth-oriented leader? Are you interested in developing your authentic leadership while creating a healthy, inclusive workplace? Hi, I'm Dr. Mira Brancu, host of The Hard Skills on talkradio.nyc at 5 p.m. Eastern on Tuesdays, where we discuss how leaders develop the hard skills needed to make a greater impact. We interview experts, have live coaching, and tackle these challenges. Listen to The Hard Skills on Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern on talkradio.nyc.
If you don't have your health, what do you really have? It's time to feel good in your body and shift from struggle to ease. Hi, I'm Elizabeth Tripp, your host of Nourish the Soul, where we explore the sacred wisdom of your body while you sit back, relax, and go on a journey of self-discovery. Join me every Tuesday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to awaken your heart, transform your well-being, and unlock a deeper understanding of yourself.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC. Uplift, educate, empower.
Nonprofits need connections to move in good directions. So cut through all the static. Join Tommy in his attic.
Shout out to my friend Brendan Levy. I call him Uncle Brendan Levy, lead singer of a band called Damaged Goods. They were called the Goods back in the 80s and 90s, but now they're older men, so they call themselves Damaged Goods. I think that's fun. And Brendan was an honoree at the Queens Chamber of Commerce Business Person of the Year event the other night, which was Wednesday night. And that was, it's chilly out this time of year in New York, man. And I remember like being very chilly that night, but it was an awesome night. Brendan's a great friend. The Damaged Goods are playing out on Long Island on 12/14, but Brendan's singing, but we wrote that song together. I call it like a Lennon and McCartney kind of thing right there. We wrote that together, although I guess he's the better singer. While we were at break, I shared the website, we-connect-the-dots.org. Or what I did was Google We Connect the Dots nonprofit. But if you want to go direct to the website, we-connect-the-dash
You could do it without the dashes too. It'll resolve to both of them.
Can you? Is it both ways? Does it show up both ways? I'm laughing because I'm looking at the URL.
Oh yeah, believe me, talking about like branding issues, when I first had that name of the organization, because people said, that's what I did. I connected
That's what you
people.
do.
I did,
yeah,
right?
I get it. Trust me, if anybody gets what you're saying, I get it. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, but I got a lot of criticism. People said, "Oh, the domain name's too long, blah blah blah," right? And I almost started to listen to them. And this is part of like being an entrepreneur. You have to kind of shut off the noise, right? And go with your gut, because that's really the best way to go. And so I was adamant. I'm like, no, we're sticking with it. And then we had a branding designer from a woman from Microsoft who helped me with the branding. And what's funny is I didn't notice this until years after the organization was established. And it was when I noticed it was the day we were on the stock exchange. We were with Microsoft up on stage and opening the stock market. And so our brands were together for the first time on the big
screen, right?
On the big screen in Times Square, right? And I noticed the colors of our dots were the same as the Microsoft dot blocks. And I didn't even notice that. And she said, yeah, we it was really, so she designed the branding, and the dots are those kind of same colors as the Microsoft colors.
That's pretty cool.
That's kind of funny. Yeah. It's kind of funny story around that, but yeah.
But branding is incredibly important, man. Listen, like I came up with this idea and just started calling myself the nonprofit sector connector, right? Talk about URLs. I'm on this whole campaign for, actually, I'll show you one of the shirts right now. I'm big on shirts, but I'm on this whole campaign because I think we have to, can you see this one?
Yeah.
Hashtag
I like that.
Stigma together. I'm on this whole campaign about we must end the stigma as it relates to the conversation around mental illness and or mental health. Shout out to Transitional Services for New York. I was at their holiday party for their staff yesterday, TSINY. 5,000 individuals they served in the New York City community who are living with severe and persistent mental illness. We have to have this dialogue, but I got the domain ending the stigma together dot like that, and that's talk about long, man, like really, like that's a long, but yes, the website's important, right? But it's branding. I want that thing, like I wanted to have the brand.
Yeah, well, we ended up getting WCTD eventually too. So if you can use we-connect, you can use it without the dashes, and also we have WCTD.org.
That's cool.
So you use the shortcut one there too, and you'll get that.
Yeah, I just did that, and it brought me to the same thing. Yeah, that's cool. And when you can get like that was always the cool thing I remember back in the day too. When you get those shorty ones, like those little tiny ones, like that was like a super win,
Yeah. So we use WCTD a lot because it's just it's easier.
It's easier. Yeah, it's just easier. I want to talk. I mean, look, neuroscience. It's STEAM. I want to talk about certifications as you talked about that. So where do we go from here? I mean, when do you decide like is We Connect the Dots that program that was up at Harvard? Like, is that what this came out of, that work, or
Well, what it evolved into was this: when she made that statement to me, I decided to do this program where I would teach and bring both boys, women and men, boys, girls, it's because it
together?
depends on the age group, use
Yep.
those different terms, right?
Yes.
Young adults
Yep.
into this, world, and how do we, teach diversity and the value of this. And so one of the things that I did at Microsoft as part of my role there was I managed a community of women at Microsoft. It's like 5,000 women at Microsoft who, it was called Women at Microsoft. And that is, as a president of that organization, and this was a stretch role at Microsoft, which is, you don't get paid for it, it's just another role that you do at the company, right? And it was, for me, it was about, a passion I had, and really demonstrating my leadership capabilities and giving me an opportunity to do that. So it really, because I came from a consulting world where I ran my own business and then went to an individual contributor at Microsoft, and that was really hard for me.
Well, you wanted to be with people, right? You needed to have that.
I needed to lead, and that
lead.
was really what I wanted to do, right? And so doing that role gave me that opportunity to lead, and it gave me an opportunity to make an impact for women at Microsoft. And so part of that is I went to a conference in New York City for leadership, and it was Women in Leadership conference in New York City. And it was at that conference there was a topic on neuroscience, your brain at work, right? And this was led by the Neuro Leadership Group, David Rock, and it really just triggered some things for me when I realized, wow, there's so much that we are learning about the brain and about how our emotions impact our ability to lead, to learn, everything, right? And so I became a neuroscience-based coach, took his certification program in San Francisco, and really took that content and said, how do we do, because reality is this kind of coaching is really expensive. It's usually for just high-level executives. It's not for everybody.
It's not.
They don't want it to be. They want it to be up there making lots of money, right?
Do you know Dr. Joe Dispenza? Are you familiar with Dr. Joe?
No, I'm not.
And again, I think you'd really vibe on his story and stuff like that. We'll talk about it offline. But like, this stuff should be attainable. I will tell you this. I'm going to share.
That's where I set out on my mission. I was like,
right.
So I was like, all right, you guys are making lots of money doing this to teach this to executives. Why aren't we teaching this to teachers? And why are we teaching this to everybody? You're like, I don't care whether you're an individual contributor or you're a leadership role. This training can impact anybody. And what I love about the training is it's not just about teaching you to communicate like in your business world, but also every aspect of you. So what I started to see was my own transformation of how I talked and communicated, because I was practicing. Keep in mind, you get this training, it's not like you're overnight an expert at it, right? It takes practice, right? To really change how you're refraining your words and your language, and thinking about and always thinking about the person you're speaking to, not yourself. Because if you transition that thought process and think about who you're speaking to or your audience, and think about their emotions, right? Because there's a saying, and this is what I love about this concept, is in the aviation world, you put your mask on yourself before you put the mask on the person, your child or your senior adult, whoever you're with, right? And so it's the same thing with emotions. If you can control and manage your own emotions, you have to do that first before you can control and manage someone else's emotions, right? Because that's where you get that like fired up, everybody's, flared up, and you've got, emotional nightmare, right? So even with your kids, right? So and I'll give you an example from
that's what I was thinking about the whole time you were saying that. I'm like, were you watching my house this morning between, 6 a.m. and 8:15? Were you here?
Oh, and that's a great one, because this is what I tell parents when I'm doing this coaching and training, and even for teachers, educators, is that if you are arguing with your child when they get off the bus in the morning, right? That child, depending on the kid, and I've got 4 of them, and 2 of them would be really triggered by this. 2 would not be so triggered by this, but they will be thinking all day long about that argument, and they're not learning. Their amygdala is basically just shutting off the PFC, and they're not learning all day. And so, and I know this because my youngest son would come home to me, and when he was really little in first grade, I'd say, "What'd you learn today in school?" And he would tell me all the stories about how the teacher did this, to this child did that. There was no like, I learned math, science, it was emotions.
Yeah.
He just would come home, and his focus, he was so distracted by the emotional challenges in the classroom that he wasn't absorbing anything. And so it was really, I had to teach him how to focus those emotions and put that and shut that, that down and refrain so that he could be paying attention in the classroom. And I know that personally, because as a child, I had the same issues.
Yeah. Yeah.
And one of the other things as a child that I learned about myself and later on as adult, because I just remember it was like written in my brain so hard, was that I would get on my report card, Laurie does too much talking during school time. Right. and my teachers, every teacher put that on my, and it was because I needed to talk about what I was learning.
Yes.
I needed to be social about my learning. And my teachers didn't think that was a good thing. Right. And that's so wrong. So in our programs, we make time for that.
I love that.
We make time for the kids to talk about what they just learned so that it writes to long-term memory, because we know that that's how the brain works.
Yeah. Well, it's also then, but like, we got to take another break in a second, but it's also like now I can engage with this other individual, and it goes to long-term learning, like you said, and I'm more enthusiastic because I'm like, oh, no kidding.
I'm excited. And that's an emotion you need. That's an emotion you need to write to long-term memory.
100%, right?
Yeah.
Like, you can vibe on that and get that stuff in and go, oh yeah, I remember, because that's when I was talking to Laurie and she said this and I said that, and then and now it's in there versus, I think, look.
Otherwise it's.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Look, I say this on the show all the time. I say it. I may come across to you right out of the gate, but I got the ADHD.
Yep.
Got it, love it. It's one of my favorite things that I get to say I have. And the thing about it is, I believe we are all neurodiverse. I thought I was whatever the heck neurotypical was. I thought that was
neurodiverse. It's neurodiverse. Yeah.
I think we're all neurodiverse, but I used to think I was neurotypical, whatever that even is.
Yeah.
It's typical, like normal. What are we talking about? The point of the matter is, I believe what you said earlier, how if we can engage the whole class, if it's more of a hands-on scenario, and that's going to get us 100% of the kids versus 50%, let's go there. And I believe we are evolving. I really do. I see it.
I'm seeing it too. Yeah.
It's great. But I love that there's organizations like yours that are doing it on the front lines. We're going to a break right now. We'll be right back. Calm down, Tommy. We'll be right back.
Hey everybody, it's Tommy D, the nonprofit sector connector, coming at you from my attic. Each week here on talkradio.nyc, I host the program Philanthropy and Phocus. Nonprofits impact us each and every day, and it's my focus to help them amplify their message and tell their story. Listen each week at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time until 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on talkradio.nyc.
Were you an essential worker during the pandemic? If you needed to learn stages of epilepsy, did you depend on advocates? Did you use new innovations to cope with mental and neurological issues? Maintaining high quality of life and keeping good mental health are what we all strive for. I'm Frank R. Harrison, host of Frank About Health, and each week top healthcare influencers, professionals, and innovators answer these questions and more. Stay tuned on Thursdays at 5 p.m. on talkradio.nyc, and I will continue to be frank about health with all of you.
Hi, I'm Linda Marcanico. The A Train to Sedona is a memoir about my journey to love and compassion. It's also the name of my new broadcast on Wednesdays at 12 noon. When we are spiritual, we embrace possibilities and ideas, which strengthen our mind, body, spirit, health, and wisdom. On the A Train to Sedona broadcast, I plan to interview guests who embrace these expansive practices. Join us on Wednesdays at 12 noon on Talk Radio New York City.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Nonprofits need connections to move in good directions. So cut through all the static. Join Tommy in his attic.
You remember, folks, do you remember Alice in Wonderland? Alice in Wonderland, you got the guy, the white rabbit. He's like, run so much to do, so many places. I'm supposed to be here, I'm supposed to be there. Sometimes that's what my inside of my brain feels like, man. Trying to be everywhere at the same time. And I'm looking at this big stopwatch going, oh my God, time, we're running out of time. Guess what? I got time. We have time. We're going to do what we do today. And then Laurie will come back because we are doing 5,000 episodes of this program. So, you have to just come back and I'm recording, I think I told you earlier, a couple of episodes of a TV show this afternoon called Long Island Changemakers. and maybe you got to fly up to Strong Island.
I love it. That would be great.
We'll do that. So, all right, I want to hear about, like, I have this. I just got to ask it because from an educational perspective, I have like 9 questions. Let's start with this one. I am of the mindset that, so I have 4 children, right? And I'm not going to beat up on higher education at this moment right here. What I'm going to say was, I don't believe that 100% of young people need to go to college or should go to college, right? Now, I want to hear your opinion on that because I think we need people in other trades and different things like that. I don't know that level of education is necessary for everybody. It's a feeling I have. And then I also want to say, like, as it relates to certifications and micro certifications and things like that, or whether it be technical school or not technical school, there's so much opportunity for people to learn. I mean, you can go, any of us can go online. I absolutely love YouTube. I love YouTube. I think it's one of the greatest things out there. I'm curious your opinion on what I would call micro certifications or designations and things like that. Not necessarily just how it relates to STEAM and STEM, but just generally, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's all about whether the certification is really, one of the things that because I've been in certification world since the 80s, right? I was probably one of the first people to get a certification in technology, right? And so I didn't take a traditional college path. I found that certifications were more valuable to me in my career, right? I went to college, but I never really, went fully through the whole degree program. I was taking programs here and there and based on what I wanted to learn, right? I wasn't looking for a degree because I didn't need one.
Right.
I really felt like, the certifications were doubling my salary and I was, learning more through those, and they were hands-on versus like sitting in a classroom, which would just kill me. And so, and just the thought of taking courses that I had no interest in, right? That was not my path. And it is not the path for everybody too, because a lot of students who are struggling with that today, and I'll talk about a couple stories personally related to my own kids and also, just where the students that I work with, so everybody has a choice of where they go and what they do. When it comes to certifications, they're huge value today, and they'll continue to be valuable as long as the whoever is the industry partner who's doing them make sure that they actually have outcomes of employment, right? And so when we think about certifications, CompTIA is a great, they were one of the first, outside of Novell and Microsoft, CompTIA was a big one, big not-for-profit that does certifications. And what I've seen and watched the evolution of certifications, and we just launched our first certification on Nebula this year. And because there really isn't a certification, an industry certification in full stack web development. There's a lot of boot camps out there, but there isn't really a certification in it. We said, how do we create a certification that really brings substantial value and becomes an industry standard over time? Because you can't, if you create a certification, you can't out of the gate have it be like, oh, it's got lots of value, right? It's got to demonstrate itself by, the fact that people get hired as a result of having it, and employers are going, wow, you really are well trained. This is the state, and that brand becomes known, right? So we're working on that. It's going to take some time. But what we did when we decided to create this certification is look at certifications as a whole and how they've been created over the years. And I've got a lot of experience in that. And so we said, we want to, so what is it that would be really valuable to somebody coming out of a boot camp for software engineering? What is the one thing that's most important when they're finishing, right, and going to get a job? That's the interview, right? Because a software developer interview is very different from any job interview you will ever be part of, right? Because they will put you through rigorous, coding scenarios, and you have to articulate your code and tell what you did, how your thought process was, and be able to demonstrate to an employer, a potential employer, that you can solve a problem with code and you can articulate how you did that and your thought process behind it, right? And so those are a lot of skills, right? They're not just coding skills, they're, personal communication skills. So we teach our soft skills program, which is our resilience training, which is the psych safety and all that stuff that I talked about before. We're teaching that. Yeah. Not just teaching it we're teaching it to educators, we're teaching it to our students. And so it's a subset. We call it the science behind learning. It talks about the emotions, how the emotions impact your learning, all of that. So that's blended into this. So when they get to this, what we do micro certs for throughout the program. So each module has at the end has a microcert. They are proctored exams, which means you're going to go online and somebody's going to make sure you're not cheating, right? And you're going to go through and answer a lot of questions about the content that you're learning. And our goal behind the microcerts was to make sure that as students were progressing through this very difficult boot camp, that they were moving forward properly. So if somebody's failing the first exam, then we've got to intervene because they're not going to make it through the second exam and third and fourth because we have scaffolding. It's going to get harder. It doesn't
but at that point though, you can actually impact the outcome.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's pause here. We got to go back here and work on this, and then we've built that scaffold. We can go forward. Otherwise, I'm 6 weeks, 12 weeks into a semester, and I'm out, man. Like,
yeah, you're failing and you're frustrated and all
right.
that. And our students will come to, we have coaching integrated into our program as well, because you need somebody to once in a while, it's like a personal trainer. You need somebody to say, it's okay. What you're feeling right now is normal. This is what everybody feels at this point in the program. It's getting harder. So, recognize that emotion, refrain it, and then know that you can do this, right?
And so it's EQ. You're using a lot of EQ though, emotional intelligence there, gang. And maybe that comes from that whole, and I pulled up the website, but the neuro leadership, your background in that work too, right? Because it's
a combination of Neuro Leadership Group and Academy of Brain-Based Leaders in California. So two entities that we use, and we actually have kind of shifted our focus more on ABL than we do neuro leadership right now.
Okay.
And so that's really, we use their assessments. They have a safety assessment that we do put every student through. It basically looks at their triggers to see what their emotional triggers are, and then how do you be self-aware of those triggers and manage those triggers so that you can move forward through adversity, right?
Well, who though? What age group? Because I'm thinking about children in my life, and
so we've done it with our younger adults too. But it's just what we're doing is we're looking at working with ABL to modify that assessment to be more younger age group than it is today, because a lot of the questions that are in the assessment are work focused and they haven't gotten to that point yet. So we have to modify that assessment to kind of get there. So we're working on that piece of it. But you can still teach the concepts to them and explain to them about the trigger. And it's all about in the moment. Any assessment you take is about your emotional state in that time that you take the assessment. You have to be very careful because you don't want it to define somebody, right?
Sure.
So you have to, any of these things like DISC and all of those things, they're in the moment, right? They don't make, it doesn't put you in a bucket. That doesn't mean who you are forever. It just means who you are in this moment. And you have to really be careful of that.
I want to pause you right there because I want to underscore that, because I hear with people with DISC, like they define themselves by DISC.
It's terrible.
Like, am, and then they say the 4 letters, like I am, but like, okay.
I could be in every one of those quadrants. It 100%. Depends on what day of the week it is.
100%. It depends on how much caffeine is running through this body. It depends on who pissed me off the morning. There's a lot of things. And did I meditate? Did I not meditate? Like a lot of things involved with that. But I think in any case, we shouldn't just block ourselves into these things.
We shouldn't. No. We have to be careful of that.
Yeah,
it's bad because I've seen what happens, especially with young adults. It puts them on a course path that they think that it's like, I'm stupid.
Yeah, I'm going to do that because that's
stupid. I'm stupid, right?
It's Carol Dweck, growth.
Oh yeah, Carol Dweck. We use a lot of Carol's work. Yeah,
right. Carol's great. Carol Dweck, the growth mindset gang. Because I'll tell you this candidly, I don't think I say I'm pretty open book on the show, and I don't think I've ever said this, but when I was growing up, I was like, things came really, really easy to me. Like early on, like the first 8 years of school, like pretty easy to the point where I didn't have to do much work at all. Like I'd show up and I'd understand it. Okay, so what I was told was he's bright, or I would hear people say he's bright, and you know what? I will tell you to this day, and I try not to talk about other people and their situation, but there are people in my life who put in much more effort than I ever did and got way farther than maybe they would have expected to get because they were not told that they were bright, or they weren't right, and they knew they had to work harder. And I will tell you this, I know I mailed it in a lot. Right. And then when I got to a point, it was too late where I thought I could still do that. And guess what, Laurie, something you probably know and our listeners know, when you're in college and you're studying finance, you can't miss 5 weeks of calculus and then show up. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't work.
So part of why I started the organization, there's another variable here, is my third child.
Yes.
So my third child is one of those kids who just was reading at 2. I mean, a brilliant kid. And what happened was, though, he started kindergarten at age 4. And so he went to first grade at age 5. And so he was really accelerating. And we were worried about, like, okay, we're pushing him too hard. And what I realized for him was we weren't pushing him hard enough.
Yeah.
And so, and he was pushing himself too. So he does that till to this day. He's just such a, already has 2 businesses. He's 23 years old. It's crazy.
Yeah.
So, but he was one of those kids where the school wasn't giving him enough.
Yeah.
And so when I thought about the organization, I ran the robotics club for the school. I did all this stuff. And then when I started We Connect the Dots, he ended up starting to teach for me at 13.
Wow.
He was teaching. And so for me, because I would tell the school, can you give him because he would get 100 on every single spelling test.
See, because then you get bored, don't you? Like, I don't know
because
if you say that,
if you're not being challenged, you're not going to fail, and you're not going to know where you're pushing yourself to, right? And you need to fail. And I was watching a kid who was never failing. He was never failing. And so I said, I need to make him fail. How do I push this envelope so that he fails?
This isn't like you didn't pass him in the hallway of the house and knock him over and stuff. You weren't kidding.
I've done that with all my kids. So yeah, I can tell you stories of what I've done to my kids. My daughter especially, she could, I pushed her off a cliff one time because I had to. So she was repelling, and it was like, you're gonna do this, go. So you really kind of have to push your kids, right? Now there's a fine line there. It's not like some of the cultures where we're really it's about letting them feel what it's like to fail.
Well, because
so that emotion is there, because here's the thing. I know so many, especially in Long Island, you look at these kids who go to college who never failed in high school, right? Yeah. They go to college and now it's hard, and they don't know how to handle that emotion of failure. And so they fail and they drop out and they come home, and mom and dad are like, you were an A student. What happened? Right. Yeah. So you have to make sure that your child understands what it's like to fail and how to handle that emotion of failure.
Yeah, because we're going to your earlier point, right?
You're going to fail. You're going to fail.
You're going to,
or you're not yourself.
Or you're not going to live, or you're not going to actually do anything, I guess, right? Like you gotta, because then you're not reaching, then you're not stretching, right?
It's like the helicopter mom, the ones that, like, every time somebody falls, they pick them up, they brush them off, right? No, let them brush themselves off.
Walk it off. That's how I used to say.
Back up and stand up,
Listen, my first, when we, again, having 4, when you have 4, like the first one, like, oh my God, right? And then they react to that, like, because they fell. But then after that, I'm like, walk it off, man. Like, what'd you do? You scratched your knee. Let's go. I mean, it's funny. I coached a CYO basketball team, and I had, for my younger son, and 12 9-year-olds are yelling different things at me last night at this practice, and I'm like, I can't even control the 4 kids I live with. What did I think I was going to be able to do in this gym for an hour on Thursday afternoon? We got to take a quick break. We come back. We got to talk about what Hackathon is real quick, what the organization needs, how we can help. How's that sound, Laurie?
Sounds good.
All right, we're right back.
Are you a high-achieving, growth-oriented leader? Are you interested in developing your authentic leadership while creating a healthy, inclusive workplace? Hi, I'm Dr. Mira Brancu, host of The Hard Skills on talkradio.nyc at 5 p.m. Eastern on Tuesdays, where we discuss how leaders develop the hard skills needed to make a greater impact. We interview experts, have live coaching, and tackle these challenges. Listen to The Hard Skills on Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern on talkradio.nyc.
Hey everybody, it's Tommy D, the nonprofit sector connector, coming at you from my attic. Each week here on talkradio.nyc, I host the program Philanthropy and Phocus. Nonprofits impact us each and every day, and it's my focus to help them amplify their message and tell their story. Listen each week at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time until 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on talkradio.nyc.
Are you a conscious co-creator? Are you on a quest to raise your vibration and your consciousness? I'm Sam Leibowitz, your conscious consultant, and on my show, The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, we will touch upon all these topics and more. Listen live at our new time on Thursdays at 12 noon Eastern Time. That's The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, Thursdays, 12 noon on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Nonprofits need connections to move in good directions. So cut through all the static. Join Tommy in his attic.
And we're back. So, Laurie, I want to talk about just we only have a few minutes left, and I want to get into to the organization. What was first, Nebula Academy or We Connected Dots? Like, why did you?
We Connected Dots came first.
Oh,
Yeah.
it did?
So I
Okay.
started that. It was my exit strategy leaving Microsoft.
Okay.
And I did that for 3 years while at Microsoft. Then I left Microsoft and did a short CEO position for a company in the UK, for a SaaS company. And SaaS is software as a service platform. And then I left that position and said, I want to start a for-profit that really helps bring teachers. We started off the company Nebula Academy to really help educators understand the science behind learning. How do you transform the education system, right? How do you help them understand how to use technology in their classroom to make fun learning experiences for kids? How do you show applied mathematics with technology like drones and things like that? We do some really fun programs. Learning to code with microbits and things that are all technology based that can help make more hands-on learning and more applied mathematics and help communication skills and help kids really learn better and increase math scores and things like that. So that's where we started, and then we evolved, and then we started doing more adult programs around our boot camps and that. So the for-profit started about a little over 3 years after the not-for-profit started, and that really came out of a suggestion from my professor at Harvard, who's an expert at non-for-profits. He said, if you're going to start a not-for-profit, don't worry about what you call it right now. Just have it help and sustain the not-for-profit. And that's really what we've done, is create an organization that's really there to help lift the organization as a not-for-profit. Like when a lot of our resources on the for-profit help out in the not-for-profit, and they volunteer. They don't get paid for their time. Sometimes we have resources. We do all their administrative back end stuff, so they don't have to do that. So we take those costs off their plate. And financially, when they've got challenges, we're there to help them. They wouldn't have our not-for-profit wouldn't have existed or survived through COVID if it wasn't for our for-profit. And so the for-profit is Laurie, Carey Consulting. That's like the original name, but we've rebranded it to Nebula Professional Development Academy. So that's the DBA for the organization, and that's how the two of them kind of were created.
And so again, go to nebulaacademy.com to find that, right? That's what I'm looking at right now. So Nebula is NEBULA academy.com. Check that out. Is there something like this? Is like, selfishly, I want to know, like, I'm not a tech person, right? But I do like to learn, and I do like to be aware of things. And is there an application for folks like me who need to understand, but I don't see myself coding. I don't really.
Yeah, that's okay. So we have a lot of different programs that help you explore that. But so here's the thing: you may not need to learn to code, but you need to understand coding and how it impacts the business, right? And how it is used, and the resources that are used for that. So if you're going to manage resources in today's businesses, you need to be able to understand that, because a lot of times, as a leader, if you don't understand the limitations or capabilities of the technology, then you could be going down a path that could be a bad path. Like that was the .com bubble, right? Where we were putting in technology just because it was cool, right? You really have to today understand the technology and is it justified, right? Is it going to drive the business forward? Is it going to create the right momentum that we need? Otherwise, it's a distraction, right? And it's expensive distraction. So that's really what we're teaching students, is to understand how the technology can impact a business. And so all of our programs integrate, like our upskill program on We Connect the Dots is a program where we help students kind of explore all the different aspects of technology and how they're used in business. Like, how do you create a website in like WordPress or drag and drop stuff? It's not coding, it's drag and drop. So you can learn to do that. And if you gravitate to it and you like it, well, maybe you might want to learn to code, right? And so then we teach business automation. So business automation is using Microsoft Power Apps, for example, Power BI. That's all, doesn't require coding. It's drag and drop. But if you really gravitate and like that, you might want to learn how to code in Python, for example, because that might take you on a path towards that. And it's really about teaching people how to learn and pick up any technology on your own. That's what we're trying to teach them, because you have to get to that point. If you're going to be in the tech industry, you better know how to pick up a new technology and learn it. Right? Because your boss is going to ask you to do that. They're going to say, hey, we've got this new thing coming out, AI, for example. How is that going to help our business? Oh, let me go do some research. I'll figure that out. And so we're teaching them those skills of how to research, use AI to do your research, and understand how AI can impact the business. That's the business automation.
Yeah, there's no excuse to say I'm just not going to do this stuff. Like I'm
Oh,
not.
you can't anymore. Yeah,
Yeah,
no.
like you
You're
can't.
you're going to be irrelevant and not have
Right,
a job.
right. Like maybe if you're 78 or 90, like maybe. But like if you're in your 40s or 50s or 60, gang, you're gonna be around another 25, 30 years easily.
Gone is the days where I learned something and now I have a job and I do it forever. It's not.
100%.
And no
Right.
matter, I don't care what career, if you're a welder, you have to learn the new technologies
Of
and
course.
new techniques. If you're
Yeah.
a doctor, you're constantly learning. If you're a dentist, I don't care what you're doing. And you have to learn technology because doctors now have to use applications and stuff like that, right? And
100%.
so
Yeah.
no matter what it is, you will have to be a lifelong learner.
Have to be. And so if you already are, gang, and you dig learning, that's great. It's opportunities like organizations like yours, We Connect the Dots and Nebula Academy, that make it attainable, reachable, accessible, I guess is the word.
But there's one other component here
Tell me.
too, is
Yep.
liking to learn. So
Yeah.
most people, because they may have had a really bad experience in their education growing up, they don't want to learn. They're like blocked by it until they've really experienced a really amazing program. And I'll give you an example of that. We had a cohort of our upskill recently, like it was like last year, I think it was this cohort. We had a woman in there who came in and she had been unemployed, and the Department of Labor was a reference. We do a lot of work for the Department of Labor. And so she came in, and basically what happened was she was like really, like not too keen on the program because she was feeling like, well, what am I learning? Why am I learning this? And she was like kind of beating us up, right? And my instructor came to us and said, this woman's really going to be a problem here. She just doesn't get what we're trying to teach her. And I said, just be patient with her. Try to help her understand. She'll get it eventually. And so then when they finished their learning and they went into their projects, she just, the light switch turned on, and all of a sudden my instructor came back to me and said, oh my God, this woman's like totally transformed. And this was this one particular instructor's first time working with us, so she was just seeing that light bulb her first time. I had seen it over and over and over again, so I knew what was going to happen, right? Or at least I hoped what was going to happen. And so, because she finally get it, and because she kept saying, oh well, I've been all these other programs, you guys are just like everybody else, I'm not gonna learn anything, I'm not gonna get a job. And then when she did the project, she went, I can actually get paid to do this. And I was like, yeah.
Game changer. But you know what it is? That's like, unfortunately, a lot of people, like, again, I have young
They
children.
don't wait for the light bulb.
They don't wait for that, but also you have a negative experience. Like I have 4 people that I drop off at school that say, I don't want to go, this is boring. And I'm like doing my best to instill and say, we need to find out what gets you fired up. Because honestly,
exactly, as a parent, you have to.
100%.
Yeah.
There's plenty of stuff. Like I got to tell you, so I got liberal arts obviously in high school, and then liberal art-ish in like community college, and then went on and got my degree in finance. But like there's a lot of stuff like you end up taking that you're not really fired up about. Not to mention you're 18, 19, 20. It wasn't exactly the best time. I want to learn now. I wanted to learn 5 years ago. I didn't want to learn so much. I was focused on other things, to be honest with you. I was a bartender, whatever. I was focused on other things, right? At that point in my life. But lifelong learner, certainly key. And then it's like finding things that get you vibed, man, and get you going.
Fired up.
Like last question, because we're way out of time. But the thing is, what's the best way to expose young people to this work? Like I'm thinking about my kids. Hey, they get involved with sports, but how do you get them involved in robotics? What's the first bite at the apple, real quick, if you could?
Yeah, so if you want to bring our programs to your school, we do that. We work with school districts and helping them bring our programs to the school district so that we can get students exposed. What the outcomes for us in a school district is we're going to increase your computer science stats. More kids are going to sign up for computer science as a result of our program. That's the bottom line. More kids are going to do better in math as a result of our programs because they're going to learn how to use applied math. More kids are going to be more excited. I can tell you a story. We did a program at Microsoft with about 200 kids in a room, and drones flying inside the room, these little drones.
How will you not have fun with that? Like,
our teachers came to us and they were like, I've never seen my students ever so excited about learning math.
So you're tricking them. You're tricking them. You're not teaching them math. You're letting them play with.
We're just showing kids need to see how that what I'm learning applies to the real world.
I need to see that at 46. I need to see why the heck I learned that stuff then. We got to leave it there. Laurie, Carey, Nebula Academy. We connect the dots. Go to the website, wctd.org. Go to nebulaacademy.com. Reach out to me if you can't find Laurie. Tommy D at philanthropyandfocus.com. Laurie, thanks for being here. I appreciate it.
No problem. Hey, one last pitch.
Yes, go.
We are doing our America tour. We're looking for sponsors to be on our RV, so we would love to make sure people are aware of that. So
how do they hook up with you on that? Go to the website.
Yeah, just go to the web. We connect to that website and look for America Tour. It's right at the top.
Awesome. All right, gang. If you can't find her, call me. Email me. TommyD.NYC on the Instagram. You'll find me. I'm Tommy D. Laurie, thanks for being here. Everybody, make it a great weekend. We'll see you next Friday morning. Bye.
Okay. Bye.
Nonprofits need connections to move in good directions. So cut through